Can you complain if you're a leader? You got to take some accountability that you've probably not made things clear to the group. And that can, more likely than not, it's that people have different understandings of what needs to be done. The people that have to execute the things you decide, they haven't studied the dynamics that went into why that's important. Or quite to the extent, you never want to rush communications to a group. You want to take the purpose of checking in with people is to find out what's on their mind. Now, what I should be welcoming that feedback, because you would not otherwise get it. Because if you're ultimately not interested in your people, they're going to lose interest in you and the team over time. This video is about some of the finer points in leading that may not be explained to you. In fact, they're pretty hard to explain to somebody. They don't really fit into like a textbook approach to leadership. They're things that you find out when you get into leading people, which, a lot of developing as a leader requires you to put time in as a leader. These are some of the examples of things that you probably find out along the way. So we'll get a little bit of a head start here. The first one is that busyness or busy leaders don't build the team just by being busy. Not everything is worth your time as a leader, and this is something that you probably won't have a feel for right away. And it's particularly difficult when you get promoted as an individual contributor, or maybe you're coming in as a first-time manager from another company. You really don't have a perspective, and you may be inclined to do your last job, which is what a lot of new managers do the first time they're in charge of people. But what you have to remember here is that your goal is to make sure every ounce of effort that people put in throughout the day is directed toward what the team needs to achieve and how the team needs to build and develop and how people need to get better at working together to achieve whatever goals or vision that's out there. And that's not just being busy throughout the day, particularly for leaders. So pay attention to what you work on through the day. If you read Drucker's Effective Executive, the first step is knowing where your time goes. But take a look at what you're spending your time on and ask yourself, is this benefiting everybody, or is this just something that I want to get done for me? Or maybe worse than that even is this just something one of the people on my team brought me that bothers them and they want me to pay attention to it? Are you working on a process improvement that really benefits one or just a couple people or maybe a department, not the whole group? That's an example of getting sucked in and spending time on something that does not benefit the whole group. And this is also a great way to tell if you're spending your time in the right places. Take a look at your calendar, take a look at your commitments, meetings, discussions, whatever, and ask yourself, does this benefit the whole team or does this just benefit part of it? The one exception to this is like when somebody on your team actually needs your frontline leadership support. They need you to be there shoulder to shoulder with them. Maybe you got a difficult customer situation, something like that. There are times where you want to like just make sure your people know that you're there with them. But that, as a rule, is not how you plan your time. You're going to handle that. You're going to make time extra to do that, to assure your people that you're there with them. So remember that not everything is important. Not everything is worth your time as the leader. Plan accordingly. The next one has bothered me for a long time, and it hopefully has caught your attention, but the use of the word accountability. Accountability may be the most important word in teamwork, but I think it's probably the least understood as well. Essentially, when we use the word accountability, that should equate to somebody saying, I'll take that. It's not something that you can just say, you're accountable, and she's accountable. That's not really true accountability. Accountability has to come from the person that's going to be held accountable. You, as the leader, you can assign responsibility, but that's different than a feeling and somebody actually being accountable. In the Marines, for example, when you're in command or you're leading a unit, you're responsible for everything that happens or fails to happen within the unit. Unit is like a department or a team. And in particular, you're responsible for people's lives. So they could die, and then you will have some accountability to those family members if that does happen. And it doesn't really matter if it's in combat or not. I mean, people die in training accidents, but definitely in combat, there's nowhere else to look. If you're in command, you are accountable. So on your team, you want to try to develop some sort of way to do that, replicate that, and the structure you can assign, like through RACI matrices or something like that. You can assign responsibility. You can designate who's accountable. But to really do this well, to have a real feeling of accountability on your team, you need people to step up and say, I'll take that. And then if it happens or does not happen, they're talked to about why it did or did not. So stop wasting your breath on telling people they're accountable, and do the things that you need to do as a leader to make them feel accountable and put their hand up and say, I'll take that, and be accountable. The next one is when leaders talk about how dysfunctional the team is. And if you're talking about your team, the people that you're responsible for, really what you need to do is look in the mirror, because any dysfunction on your team is really a reflection of what you tolerate. The only exception might be, when you first get to some place, it's fine to notice there may be dysfunction. But when you've been there a length of time, and that's kind of hard to tell how long that is, but it's a good general rule of thumb. When you're leading a group of people, you don't describe them as dysfunctional, because fundamentally that's on you anyway. So you have a team of 10 people and you have 2 people that just can't get along. They can't go with the flow. They can't do the things that are needed. You need to deal with that. And if you let them remain as a detractor to the success of the team, then yeah, it's dysfunctional, but so are you. If the nature of the work is just so complicated, people can't figure out how to do things, you have to get in there. You have to do the things needed to either get people trained up, educated, informed on what does need to be done, or you got to change. Maybe you got to simplify things. So something that I really feel strongly about is not really possible for a leader to describe their team as dysfunctional, because in the end, it's really just a reflection of the leader itself. Dealing with people who don't do what they say they're going to do, they don't meet their commitments. It's always possible to say that you're going to do something. In fact, you probably experience this. People do say they're going to do a lot of things, but what matters and where your role really becomes important is when what is committed to is not done. So how do you handle that? It is possible that things don't work. Things don't always work out, but the people that participate in getting things done, it is possible for you to do everything that you say you're going to do. Doesn't mean necessarily the result is going to be what's expected, but if you say you're going to have something done, it's possible for you to do it. But you might say to yourself, well, it is possible for things not to be able to get done. And I agree with that. So how do you differentiate those things? It mainly comes down to what people commit to doing. Have they done everything humanly possible to get the job done or not? And a real common one is, well, I didn't have time to do A, B, and C. You have to look at why they're saying that. But as a general rule of thumb, and definitely for you as the leader, you don't want to have that outlook, that perspective. You don't want to say that to yourself. It's okay for me as a leader to go to my boss and say, well, I ran out of time, because the fact of the matter is you probably could have worked extra. You probably could have worked a little bit after hours. You could have kept them informed along the way and said, hey, I need a little bit more time, that kind of thing. So what do you do when somebody just doesn't do what they say? Well, there's a lot of ways to handle it, too many to go through on this video, but the one thing that you cannot do is nothing. So if somebody doesn't get something done, or if somebody's, professional behavior is slipping a little bit, and a good example is, do people come to work on time? Do they stay the amount of time that's required? Which you could say, well, who cares how long I work as long as I get my job done? So it's got to be one or the other. But let's just say neither of those is working out and things are just not getting done. The worst thing you can do is nothing. You have to at least just say something. And it could be as simple as, hey, I noticed you're coming in a little bit late. Is everything okay? I mean, do you have enough work? And it doesn't really matter what the answer is. The big thing is that you've said something, and they know that you're observing that sort of behavior, and they know if there's a problem. You may not know. You can't tell if somebody really legitimately has a problem. So they're going to do one of two things. They're going to continue to, in this case, come in late, which makes it pretty easy to deal with, or they're going to start coming in on time, or they're going to tell you, yeah, I got this issue that I'm working with. And that's all great. You want to know that anyway. I'm going to talk about that on this video a little bit later, is why that's important to know that. So if somebody doesn't do something as expected and you are convinced that they know better, what do? The worst thing you can do is nothing. Beyond that, just saying something and finding out what's behind that is what you want to do. Something else that's pretty common out there is you hear this expression, we need better communication. Well, what does that mean? That's kind of a useless communication in itself. But the way I think you should see that as a leader in the same spirit as being accountable is you got to take some accountability that you've probably not made things clear to the group. And that can take a lot of different shapes. One is that people don't understand what is expected of them. It may be as simple as, well, simple, but not necessarily easy, explaining roles and responsibility, what things, your job is this, and here's what it entails. More likely than not, it's that people have different understandings of what needs to be done. And if those are people on your team, maybe your direct reports, you are responsible for sorting that out. You have to get people together, review people's view of situations, and work through that. And the only way to do that really is to get people together and identify where people are missing each other. But it is your responsibility to do that. Another thing that I think leaders overlook is the importance of repetition and repeating what seems to be even the most basic details. They're not basic, probably. You think they're basic because you've looked at things for a long amount of time. You've worked on projects, internal projects, on how to make processes better. But more times than not, the people that have to execute the things you decide, they haven't studied the dynamics that went into why that's important quite to the extent that you have. So when you're talking to your group, first of all, and I've said this before, is you never want to rush communications to a group. You want to take whatever amount of time is needed to clarify the message, get it right, particularly if you're just emailing it. But even when you're going to go into a group and you deliver some sort of verbal talk, or you have an agenda item that you're responsible for talking about, you don't want to rush putting that together. You want to be very clear about it. But kind of like, what do you do if people don't do what they say they're going to do? The worst thing you can do is not address poor communication. There's a reason for it. You're the leader. You got to get in there and find out why that is, clarify and connect the dots, get people what we call speaking the same language. So repeat the basics. Don't assume people know or understand like you do, because they probably don't, but repeat, and get feedback on what's confusing to the team. Can you complain if you're a leader? And the short answer really is no, you should not complain about things as a leader. And what is complaining? Complaining would be just kind of like showing your emotions, venting things out. Can you criticize things that are not running like they should be? Yeah, you should do that. And you should kind of know what you're talking about when you do that. But really, the part that other leaders maybe won't be able to explain to you when you start out is that you need to be concerned about people's perception of what you're saying. And if it's negative, and that's negative would be what I would equate to a complaint, then the effect on them is going to be that it's okay for me to feel the same way, or maybe even worse. So critiquing or being critical of the way things are running with specifics on how to make them better, yeah, you should do that. Complaining is more showing your an emotional, a negative emotion towards something without a fix-it plan or a corrective action to make things better. So can you complain as a leader? Really, the answer is no. And since we're all human, if you can't keep yourself from never complaining, you have to, one, seriously minimize when you do so. And then two, you have to realize that when you do that, you're having a negative follow-on effect with your people, and they're taking it that way. How you doing? Checking in with somebody. When you are checking in with somebody, whether it's a scheduled one-on-one or just talking in maybe the break area, or if it's remote, just a Teams call out of nowhere, there's no agenda. The purpose of checking in with people is to find out what's on their mind. Now, what I do personally, I do lead with some comments on how I think things are going. I think that shows that you're preparing for your time with your person. But after that, the agenda has got to be driven by who you're talking with, because that's their opportunity to kind of reverse the chain of command, let's say, and they should be in charge of the information flow coming your way. And if you're a savvy leader, if you're an experienced, maybe not even experienced, but if you know what you're doing as a leader, you want that. You don't want just another session where you're talking to the group and telling them what needs to be done, and maybe even, maybe you have a negative approach and you're just telling people why things are not happening and why things need to get better and why. The one-on-one time or the informal check-in, that's the reverse should be true. You should be welcoming that feedback because you would not otherwise get it. Another aspect of this is people need to know that you are curious about what's going on in their lives. If you see your people as workers and easily replaceable, you're probably not going to advance very far as developing a proactive team with high levels of initiative. People really only do that. One of the main reasons people do that is because they feel appreciated. There's other reasons, like they're supported, they feel like the job is meaningful. But if it's a total beatdown every time, you're really only going to get what you're asking for as a best case scenario. But when you check in with people, you're kind of opening the door. You're letting them know that what is going on in their life matters to you as their leader. And you might have super committed people that really don't need that, or at least appear that they don't need that. But that's not going to last forever. People who are super committed, super dedicated, motivated by maybe other things that the job provides. Maybe it's a really high paying job. Maybe they get a potential of a huge bonus. Those things are pretty tangible and they don't last forever. Sooner or later, people's self-worth or need to be acknowledged is going to take over. So the way you can do that is by doing those informal check-ins, doing the one-on-ones with the agenda really turned over to the other person. Because if you're ultimately not interested in your people, they're going to lose interest in you and the team over time. Hope this helps. Follow for more. I believe in communicating the things that are not necessarily taught in schools, the kind of leadership bumps that you're going to accumulate along the way. In fact, after 20 years or 10 years or maybe even just 6 months of bumping into these problems as a leader, you're going to feel like you're much better off. But that's the purpose of this channel. Thanks.